Hi, I'm Joshua.
Hi, I'm Jeremy.
Welcome to the Brothers Judah.
Welcome. Today's the final 7 deadly sin.
Yeah.
Pride.
Yeah.
I think the toughest one to explain.
Yes. And the toughest one to, I think, free ourselves from.
I would agree. I would agree because I think a lot of the other sins, there's a root in pride. Like last week when we were talking about, last week or the week before, we was talking about envy. And a lot of it was based in pride.
Yeah.
So, do you want to start it off or do you want me to? I was thinking maybe we could start off with this. Well, one, I looked up the definition of pride just to see. There was 2 definitions. One was the consciousness of one's own dignity. And then I looked up dignity, and it was talking about a feeling of honor or being respected, things like that. So that's one. And then the other one was the other definition of pride was feeling like deep satisfaction and pleasure in one's own successes and achievements. So,
I mean, both those definitions to me would be the sinful aspect of pride. I think, I think if we accomplish something and we're proud of it, I think there could be a healthy expression of that. But I think the way those definitions were written, they both sound sinful to me.
well, that's what I was going to say next,
Yeah.
which is like even an hour ago, I just got off the phone with my friend, and I said, "Oh, I got to go. I'm going to film an episode."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, what's it on?" I said, "Pride." And he said, "Oh, okay." And he said, "I'm very proud of you and your work and stuff."
Oh, that's funny.
Which, nothing against him. He's an awesome guy. But I mean, I used to think pride was something good. You know, when you're young, take pride in your work and people, a lion's pride, and it's.
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of it being a sin from a biblical perspective, like the story of God leading the Jews out of Egypt for 40 years in the wilderness in the desert. When they started to, like, once they get to the promised land and they start to get like all these blessings and they start to get prideful, God repeatedly tells them, like, don't forget, like, who led you out of Egypt, like.
Yeah.
Don't think you led yourself out of Egypt. Like, I think pride as a sin is thinking something that we get from God is us, is owed or due to us, when really it's a gift from God and we're not, like, we didn't create it. So
Yeah, I think definitely instead of being appreciative of God and what was given to us, it turns it inward and selfish. And now you're looking towards yourself and your own achievements and how great you are, or the individual is.
it's like if you gave me, like, a brand new Corvette or something, or like a Tesla Model S.
The Corvette was a good example because I have a story that goes along with it. I'll tell you it.
All right, so let's say you give me, like, a fancy Corvette.
Yeah.
And then I start driving out on the road, I'm like, I'm bad. And I'm thinking I'm cool, but you gave it to me. It's like God gives us these blessings, and then we think we're all hot because of it. But it's like it came from God. Like,
So I have to tell the Corvette story now.
okay.
I wasn't sure if I was going to tell it, but I have to now because you brought up Corvette.
Yeah.
So I recently, a year ago, I think. Yeah, a year ago, I purchased a Corvette, and it's an old 1992 Corvette. So it's nothing spectacular, but for me it was awesome, and it's red, and it was really taking it was kept in good condition. So, and I got it, and I. Obviously, I'm happy. I put on the Knight Rider music, and I'm driving, and it's fun to drive, and there was nothing wrong with that. But I started to sense myself feeling, I don't know if it was pride or something, but like, yeah, I'm cool. I started to feel that, like, I'm cool driving this, like, manual Corvette.
Yeah.
And as soon as I felt that,
Yeah.
I then scraped the side of it against a guardrail, and now I had. And now I have a scrape along the side.
Oh, man.
And then I instantly felt like shame and humbled.
Yeah.
Like now when I drive it and people see the scrape on the side, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you can't even drive a car. You're like, so And when that happened, like I instantly was like, yep, I was feeling the feeling like I was cool in this car, and that was God knocking me down. Which it sounds bad, God knocked me down, but I actually years ago I prayed to God and asked Him to keep me humble.
Yeah.
And many times over the years, stuff like that has happened. Where when I start to feel myself losing, the humbleness, I immediately get reminded.
And it's also, where do we get our worth from? Like, our worth doesn't come from fancy cars or fancy clothes. Like, our worth comes from being loved by God, and that's the most important thing. So, and that's why pride, like, they say pride's like the worst sin, because it keeps you from heaven, because it keeps you from basically accepting God's love.
Yeah.
Jesus said that all sins will be forgiven, but blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven. And I kind of relate that quote to pride, because blasphemy of the Holy Spirit is almost like exerting my will instead of following God's will.
Yeah, like, I know better than you.
I'll It's like the Holy Spirit is guiding me like this, and I'm like, no, I'm going to go my way. It's a form of pride, and that keeps you out of heaven. It keeps you from being embraced by God's love, and that's why it's really, the worst. It's like, it's insidious too. It constantly creeps up. I noticed, like, a couple of days ago, I was feeling it, and it's a continual practice. So
it's a tough one, and I mean, the Bible, it says, pride comes before the fall, and it's completely true.
Yeah,
completely true. I even notice it. Something as simple. I was playing frisbee with my son, and at first he was like, "Oh, he was staying humble, and we're throwing back and forth." And then he made a good catch and a good throw to me, and I watched him get like, "Oh yeah, I'm bad." And then he threw the next one. It was like, and hit the ground, and it's like I watched him get that, like, proud, and then immediately mess up. And what it was, his mind turned away and was all focused on himself, that he wasn't paying attention to what he was actually doing. And I've noticed it with myself so many times.
It keeps us focused on ourselves when, like, really what's fulfilling in life is how we're serving.
Yeah.
So when we're focused on ourselves, it's like a black hole. It's like we're just like, it's not very fulfilling. So.
Yeah. It's tough, because it's one of those, there's a very subtle, like, nuance that, like, it's good to I don't want to say take pride in your work, but what most people think take pride in your work is, to work hard and to try to do a good job and to respect the work and what you're doing and that, but it's very subtle when it turns into.
But that's not really pride. Taking pride in your work, that expression, means like doing a good job.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's fine doing a good job, but when it subtly shifts to you feeling good, like, I did that.
Like, I'm so great.
I'm like, it's a very subtle shift where, like, and a lot of times I feel it where I'll do something and I'll be like, I'll be doing a good job and I'm feeling good, and I step back, and then I feel it shift to, like, I'm good. Like, I did that. And I was like, oh no. And that's a very subtle shift that you have to really be aware of. And it's difficult to pinpoint it, but
well, one of the central themes of the Bible, specifically the Old Testament, is not to have idols. Like, it's an overwhelming theme. Over and over again, it's repeated. And, God refers to idols as the work of your hands. So an idol is something you idolize, but then it's also, the ancient Jews made wooden statues and golden statues, and then they worshiped them, and those are the work of their hands. And God says, like, they can't get up and run away. They can't do anything. Like, they can't do anything. They're, they were basically made by human hands. So I think pride, a form of pride, is idolizing the work of our hands, like making something say, like, I'm so great, look what I did. That's a form of idolatry, because we're not loving God, we're loving this kind of little object that we made, that even if we have a skill, like as a woodworker, we got that skill from God. It's like
Yeah.
all gifts and blessings come from Him. So it's really a futile.
It's funny because
Yeah.
I just read Judges chapter 2,
Yeah.
and the entire chapter is over and over and over again.
Yeah.
They go, so Israel, everything was good. I'm obviously not using the same words. I'm just paraphrasing, but everything was good. And then the next generation that came up forgot what God had done for them. They started taking pride in themselves and started worshiping, Baal, however you pronounce it, Baal, and then immediately after that, when they started doing that, horrible things would happen.
Yeah.
They'd be, captors would come in, they'd be taken away as slaves, they died, they'd get sickness and stuff, and it was a cycle back and forth.
Yeah.
And when that happened and they were beat down, then they would turn back to God. They'd start focusing on God, stop worshiping idols, and stop sinning, and then they'd be lifted back up. They'd be successful and have all this good stuff,
Yeah.
and then they'd immediately forget where the true blessing came from. They'd look towards themselves and start being sinful and selfish and worship idols. Back down.
I know. It's pretty wild.
Like I read Judges chapter 2. It's just over and over again. And in that chapter it happened many times. I don't know the exact number, but it was, I would guess, more than 5 easy. But it also happened other times.
It happens all throughout the Old Testament.
all throughout the whole
That's
Testament.
literally the story.
It's up and down,
of the Jews.
It's
Yeah.
like, why can't we learn
Yeah.
to, like, and I see it in my life too. It's like up, feeling good, then you get knocked back down, humbled. Oh, and I'm humble. Because you're humble and you're focusing on right, you stop sinning, you're focusing on God, you're behaving, then you start climbing up, and then at some point you start, it's the same thing, like you actually, people exercise hard and they feel good. Oh, I deserve this ice cream or burrito or something, so they eat. So it's, or, you make money, spend it, and it's, like, why can't we just
stay in that? Well, I think we do more and more over time. It's a practice. Like, the more we practice, the more we can stay in that place of God's love, which is the most fulfilling place. I know for me, like, the cycles of up and down are like agonizing, and it's like painful. Like, I'd much rather just stay humble.
Well, in a previous episode, you had mentioned it's a daily practice.
Yeah.
And as you do the daily practice, you develop the strength and the habits and, to be better at it. And I think for me, did you want to say?
Well, I think it's like it's like an acceptance and a surrender to God's will. Like that, for me, that's where the battle was. It was like my will, God's will, my will, God's will. And it's the more I learned that it's painful to follow my will, the more I just surrender and stop talking myself into not following God's will. So I just...
But when you say that,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about, let's say you wanted to do something sinful, or, you wanted, like, I don't know, one of the last episode, use my example, gluttony. So so I wanted to eat that entire bag of chips. So that's my will, but God's will is that's not good for me. So I just, even though I have that desire, I just surrender to God's will and say, that's not good for me, I'm not going to. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the discomfort, like, I've learned that the discomfort of following my will is worse than the discomfort of following God's will.
Yeah.
So even if I feel discomfort, like if I want to, if I feel like God's guiding me to something and I want to do something else, and the thought of not doing that thing I want to do, like, aches, there's like an ache in there, I know that, like, it's going to be more uncomfortable if I just do it my way. So I've basically just surrendered in little and large ways to I'm just going to follow God's will, and I know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, for me, it wasn't just a instant, like, I'm doing it this way, then I surrendered to God's will, and now I'm doing it right. For me, it's like a gradual thing. So say the cycles in the Old Testament of being successful, being proud, turning away from God, then being pushed down, then humble, then up and down. My cycles, say, were like this, but as I'm developing, spiritually and growing and maturing, the dips are getting, not as deep, and the highs are getting, and they're also the amplitude is getting shallower. So it's like,
me too. That's what I was saying. I was just saying, for me, that process is one of acceptance and surrendering.
I think you're right. Realizing that the little pleasure you're going to get or weighing the discomfort from not having your way
Yeah.
versus the discomfort from not doing God's way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it pales in comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so pride.
Yeah.
I don't know, anything else?
I don't know.
Did we hit everything then?
I don't know. I mean, it's
We'll do a little ASMR with the sipping of the water.
I don't think we're allowed to do that. I don't think we're allowed to do that anymore.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I thought they were like,
Banning it?
yeah, banning those videos and stuff.
Oh, really? Uh-oh. I said the word. The AI is going to read it. And
Nah. I don't know. I mean, I think anyone who's listening, I think if, you know, we want to be fulfilled, right?
yeah.
And people think having that sports car or having all that money or looking like I'm really buff or like people think that's going to bring fulfillment. And then ultimately we learn that true fulfillment comes from God's love, and
Yeah.
it's more fulfilling. So it's not like you don't really, it shouldn't be that you have to convince someone like, here, take this amazing, more fulfilling, greater blessing instead of this lesser, more painful thing. It's like, it shouldn't be something we have to convince. It's just like
It's
this.
funny.
You know?
I'm actually trying to convince my son the same thing. He complains. He's like, I'm like, he wants to say eat cookies or something. I'm like, Jacob, do you think I don't want you to eat cookies because I want to see you be miserable right now? Like no. He's like, yeah, but you're making me miserable. I'm like no, no.
Yeah.
Eating cookies and eating this unhealthy food,
Yeah.
it's going to make you more miserable. It's like I'm trying to, but and that's kind of how we are.
Yeah.
We're the son to the father, and and we're.
Yeah. And God tests and chastises the ones he loves. He tests us.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same to Jacob, and
Yeah.
but it's out of love. It's not out of
Yeah.
I'm trying to help him,
Yeah.
be the man he can be,
Yeah.
potential. So, all right, I think I'm tapped out on pride. There's probably more to talk about, but I think we covered some good deals.
Yeah. So I feel pretty. Feel okay. Not too prideful about this episode, but I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah. I think we covered it. So, all right. Well, that wraps up the 7 deadly sins. So
all right.
Next week we'll go on to whatever touches us during the week.
Yeah, we'll start with something fresh.
Yeah, whatever makes us.
Yeah.
Gives us a spark, inspiration to talk about.
Yeah. So, all right. Have a great day.
Take care.